Hello, hi everyone. Very warm welcome to today's session. We're going to talk a bit about managed detection and response services, or called as MDR. We have a slew of experts lined up today to talk about their perspectives and their opinions in the market. But before we get started, right, let's have the audience chime in terms of where are they joining us from today and how's the weather like. At least I'm joining from London and it's very grey as usual, as is this time of the year in London. So please do comment in the chat box in terms of where you're joining from and how's the weather there. So I think till the audience does that, how about we do a quick round of introduction? So I'll get started. My name is Ricky Sundrani, partner with the commercial and solution analytics team at Everest to lead a lot of our work around price and solution deal advisory for cloud infra cybersecurity deals. Been with Everest for about 11 years now. I'm joined by very able cybersecurity colleagues on the call today. Let me go around the room. Kumar, if you want to do an introduction, followed by Vinamra and Arjun, please.
Sure. Thanks, Ricky, for having me here today. Kumar Avajit, Vice President with Everest Group, lead our cybersecurity research, which is part of the larger engineering and IT services, the technology services area. I'm joining in from our headquarters, our office in Gurgaon in India. Been with the firm for almost 5.5 years now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vinamra Shukla. I'm Vice President with the firm, and I lead pricing and solutioning engagement for cybersecurity and cloud services. And I'm joining from Gurgaon and excited to talk about some of the commercial trend in the MDR space.
Awesome.
Arjun?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Vinamra. So firstly, hello to everyone joining this LinkedIn Live. Glad to have you all here with us. My name is Arjun. I'm a practice director at Everest Group. I co-lead our cybersecurity services research and advisory business along with Kumar. And since we are going to cover MDR extensively today, I am also one of the co-authors of our first MDR report from 2023 and also the latest cut of it that got published in the first half of 2025. In terms of where am I joining from, Ricky, that's a good question. I'm joining from Bangalore. I'm glad to be part of today's conversation. Perhaps now I'll have to hand it over back to you, Ricky, to kick us off.
Thanks, Arjun. Thanks, everyone, for that. I think that just helps. So, just to get us started and set what we're going to talk about today. So, for the people who are not from a security background, so MDR really stands for Managed Detection and Response, which is a managed security service that combines advanced threat detection technologies with human expertise to monitor, detect, and respond to cyber threats. Why is it important, right? Obviously, I think we've heard a lot about this in the last 4 to 5 years, right? Because traditional security operations have now been overwhelmed by volume and complexity of the alerts that you get, right? And cyber attacks are much more sophisticated and persistent, which do require like a 24/7 vigilance. And the challenge is that many organizations lack in-house talent to sort of support that, and that's where MDR fills a gap with skilled analysts and threat hunters. It's not just the detection, but MDR provides real-time response, which is critical for minimizing damage. But why is it critical now, right? Why are we discussing MDR now? Because you're seeing a surge in ransomware attacks, supply chain attacks, and nation-state threats. Organizations are no longer relying on reactive measures, and both attackers and defenders are using AI, right? So making MDR providers with the key in leveraging AI from defense. We're also starting to see a bit of consolidation in the market, which we talk about today. And we're also seeing enterprises are asking for more outcome-driven services, right? Which is implied by faster detection times, guaranteed responses delays. So all of that we'll talk about today. I think if you also compare and contrast, right? So 2021, 2022, I think I did my first project or deal on MDR back in 2021 when I think the market was very fragmented, and we were starting to see some of the big boys come into the room. For example, I think you just around the corner when Microsoft started launched some of their MDR services. But back in 2022, 2023, we started to see a bit of consolidation of this fragmented market. We saw some larger MSSPs and cloud security firms start getting acquired by MDR providers. And the differentiation shifted from just detection to response and remediation. And then in 2023, 24, we kind of started to see AI ML adoption started really accelerating, right? That's where we moved from MDR to an emergence of MDR plus the XDR convergence, right? Where extended detection platforms were bundled with managed services. And I think one of the most important moments was expansion beyond IT into OT and IoT environments. I think that was a pivotal moment in the journey for how we've seen MDR evolve. And contrasted to today in 2025, I think it's almost becoming the de facto managed security model, often replacing or complementing legacy SOC, but SOC outsourcing, right? Um, so that's a bit about sort of where we are, and that's where we kind of talking about today. So with that, I want to bring in Kumar into the conversation. So Kumar, uh, what how do you given where we are in terms of the market, uh, how do you see the state of the market evolving, and what are your perspectives on where this market is headed?
Sure. I think it, continues to be a high demand market for enterprises, and some of these reasons that you clearly called out today. I think even in the past 5 years, ransomware continues to be a menace out there within enterprises. I recall recently within UK, there was this recent ransomware attack on a leading supplier, leading retailer out there, and a couple of other retailers. So in terms of this menace, is it continues to grow, keeping enterprise on its edges. So detect and response technologies become pivotal. Definitely see, if you talk about ransomware, the cost has gone so much. So back in 2019, probably per event, it was 1 million. Now it is 5 million. Net, there is no silver bullet, which I've heard or I've seen out there where enterprises have a ready solution, and that the solution doesn't exist because how traditional infra has evolved. I think it has sort of become more complex, almost at a disarray with multiple clouds, application, and now AI infusion in the tech stack of enterprises. When I say AI infusion, obviously they are more willing to adapt large language model, co-pilots, agents, etc., giving attack vectors more opportunities and more options, and hence seeing a surge in cyber threats. So the net of it is that ransomware, along with this complexity of enterprise tech stack, is definitely a strong driver out there. Again, cyber continues to have a talent as a big challenge. There are numerous reports. I think the most popular one is from WEF. Last year it was 3 million talent shortage. This year it is 4 million now. Again, I see a couple of other reasons also where rise in talent cost as well as shortage of it uh, increases the reliance on an outsourced provider, because in-house maintaining niche skills like threat hunting is becoming difficult for enterprises. And interestingly, what we see in this particular market, I think the rise in talent cost is driving large part of transformation with talent, where we're seeing talent moving to an offshore or near shore as an alternative to meet demands. And in this current macroeconomic condition where CISOs are facing budgetary challenges, there are definitely more opportunities to more demand to outsource it. At the same time, we track this market in two ways. Generally, from a supply side, we do see MDR getting services being offered by MDR by large GSIs, as well as a couple of, and when I say GSI, global system integrators, or MDR specialists are another category which we've sort of recently covered in our research, which is focused on the MDR stack. And we see that both ways the GSIs are trying to expand and meet this talent shortfall by opening more opportunity, opening more SOCs or centers in nearshore and onshore geographies, just to cater to enterprise demand, as well as also we are seeing more specialist providers bringing the scale, trying to cater to the enterprise demand by opening offshore centers in low cost geographies as well. I think from a industry perspective, a couple of sectors like BFSI, healthcare, where continuous monitoring and compliance is a key mandate with specific compliances. Definitely, they are more keen to outsource these services, more keen to partner and have managed detection and response as a key capability in their armor, where we see most enterprises leaning towards. Also, I think last but not least, one of the interesting things which we is seeing, and you talked about it, how OT became an important thing and is getting merged with IT. I think that convergence is also sort of requiring another attack surface for threat actors, which I spoke about earlier. But at the same time, for critical infrastructure, it is more important that you have the right monitoring capabilities. Uh, we see a lot of this also sort of coming in specialist market as well. I think as SMBs market or mid market, what we call for enterprises up to $5 billion of revenue, I think we're doing a lot of research around that, and Arjun is leading that. So Arjun, I think I had a question for you, that where do you see from an specialist mid market perspective changes out there from a demand standpoint which are standing out?
Yeah. Thank you, Vijay, for that question. And I think you are right. We just wrapped the analysis for cybersecurity services for mid-market peak metrics assessment, and it is going to be published on the portal in early October. So all the mid-market focused audience, perhaps on today's live, can actually read through it and understand a lot of it, especially on how things are moving on mid-market from cybersecurity standpoint once it's out. Now, coming back to your question, Avijit, on how do we see the impact of mid-market on MDR? Of course, MDR is one of those key in-demand offerings from cybersecurity standpoint. In fact, if I were to kind of look deeper into this, you'll see that it is not just a large enterprise story anymore. Historically, if you look at MDR was almost synonymous with Fortune 500 adoption. But now mid-market enterprises, mid-market organizations, they make a good portion of the overall demand for MDR services. And if you were to look at why there's this shift in demand pattern, I believe there are two big reasons to it. One, mid-market organizations face the same threat sophistication as any other large enterprise, but the fraction of the budget and even more acute talent shortages. So that's one big reason why it has bubbled up in terms of demand in past couple of years alone. Secondly, the overall push on for being on cloud within mid-market organizations has also flattened the technology playing field, meaning their attack surface is as complex as any other larger firm, and hence they need similar grade security layer, which then translates into demand for MDR services. Interestingly, we are also observing that MDR is becoming the SOC as a service kind of a model for mid-market organizations who are now skipping traditional security build-outs such as SIEM or on-prem SOC or SOC as a service. They're directly now adopting MDR as their first line of defense. So there is certainly a shift in how they are consuming these services. Even on the provider ecosystem side, I think there's an interesting observation that we have from our mid-market analysis. So a lot of the MDR service providers are now creating more tailored, lighter, more modular, and more cost-effective MDR offerings specifically designed for mid-market organizations, and they often bundle the coverage for cloud, endpoint, and SaaS applications, which essentially means choosing XDR tools over EDR tools, but again in a lighter, cost-effective, and a cookie-cutter kind of a solution approach, primarily because the economics are huge, right? So the mid-market segment is at least 5 to 8 times the large segment by volume. And that creates the next S curve of demand for MDR services. So the net of it, specifically on mid-market, the mid-market adoption isn't just an incremental growth. It's also reshaping how MDR is now turning into a mass market service, driving that scale and standardization across the board. So that's one big reason as to what is contributing to MDR services growth in the market. But there's another big reason that is fueling the demand for MDR, and that is the enterprise shift from best of breed to best to integrate or easy to integrate. So enterprises are moving away from dozens of siloed solutions. Instead, they want to now focus on MDR as a central integration hub that brings in data from IT, from OT, from identity, from multi-cloud, primarily because attackers exploit these gaps between the tools, not the tools themselves in majority of the cases, and integrated visibility removes those blind spots. Secondly, I think on the same lines of easy to integrate, I think the CISO fatigue is real when you talk to end enterprises. So I'm essentially talking about managing 40, 50 security providers, and that simply isn't sustainable for any organization. So the whole integration story also equals simplification for security leadership within the enterprises. And interestingly, MDR is evolving into that connective tissue for cybersecurity within these organizations, where the value lies not just in detecting threats, but also in orchestrating and correlating signals from the stack. So, Ricky, I think I took slightly longer than what I had anticipated, but I believe these are the two other market drivers outside of what Kumar covered in terms of what are the drivers for MDR. So yeah, that is how we see it as of today.
I think that's a very strong, very excellent articulation of what's working, but why is MDR so relevant in the mid market? I mean, if I have to just summarize, I think mid market and MDR are kind of match made for each other, right? I mean, I see a very strong correlation and see a very strong fit. Right, but so just changing gears a bit, right? I think one of the biggest conversations I hear from speaking with a lot of buy side organizations, from both CSOs as well as CFOs, is that cybersecurity is getting very expensive, right? And MDR services are not just seen as premium, but organizations also dealing with as you spoke about, a proliferation of tools, right? They have endpoints, SIM, SOAR, cloud security platforms, threat intel feeds, all of which is sort of adding to the cost, right? And at the same time, if I'm compare it, I think the talent shortage is real, right? So MDR providers themselves are facing rising costs, investments in AIs, and also sort of these acquisitions that's happening in the market. And to make it even more complex, the MDR market is fairly sort of very competitive right now, with we have both MSSPs as well as specialists fighting for market share. So that raises an important question in terms of, in spite, given all of this context, how are and this is, I think, Vilamri, you're best suited to answer this, but how are MDR prices really evolving in the market environment of this rising costs and very high intense competition?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we all talked about the talent shortage, right? Kumar, Arjun, and I think Ricky, you also talked about the talent shortage. So definitely, if you look at the price movement which happened in the MXTR services, we have seen an increase of around 4% in the last 2.5 years. So the price which is indexed to 100 has almost gone up, by 4% in 2.5 years. And of course, there are multiple reasons for it. One, we already talked about talent shortage, right? And then growing complexities, growing skills, continuous evolution of the services, right? That has all led to increased demand of these services, which is driving up the FT rate, right? At least for this service. And then I think the second important point is we have seen continuous augmentation of the capabilities, right? When it comes to MXTR products or solutions, OEMs, vendors, specialized vendors, they have always kept on augmenting the tool with some of the new functionality around artificial intelligence, or make the overall process very simplified, right, through adding the different modules, right? So which again has led to the increase in the tool price when it comes to the MXTR service. And MXTR, if you look at the market, it is typically sold as a bundled offering, which not only comprises of the managed services part, but also the tooling part, right? So but I think at the same time, we also need to understand, given there is a lot of discussion and there is a lot of evolution around AI, right? Generative AI and then agentic AI coming into the play, right? We also need to understand what could be the future implication of the different use cases that are into the production state or that are into the pilot stage. So Gen AI, I think we have seen some of the use cases that have already moved to the production state. Agentic AI is still in the makings, and we are seeing the use cases at the pilot stages. So, and what we understand, because of the AI, your L1 layer is heavily impacted, right? In fact, what we understand in the future, maybe in the next 2 to 3 years, it will also start impacting your L1.5, L2, L3 layer, right? That will have a far more implication on the prices, right? So it's not only about the implication on the price. it is also about the simplification of the process and the operational efficiency. So we do understand, and we also see happening in the current deals, right? So if you see, there has been an improvement in the MTTR, MTTT, right, which overall shortened the incident life cycle. And one of the other interesting hypotheses, and what we understand based on our analysis, is that because of agentic AI, anyways, we can expect another 20 to 30% additional productivity gains in the next 2 to 3 years, right? So although we do understand there will be shortage of the resources that will keep on driving the FT rate, but at the same time, we also need to understand the continuous evolution of the AI, right? So that will help in bringing down the overall price, right? So that, yeah, I think this is a general perspective. This is what we are seeing in the market when it comes to MXTR services. So yeah, we would uh, see, right, how the pricing shaped up, but again, I think depending on multiple factors around the skill shortage and the impact of the AI.
And I think
So yeah, Ricky, I think, yeah.
a follow-up conversation question to that would be anything, and this also goes back to what Arjun mentioned, right? So if you have to succeed at being able to offer MDR services to mid-market customers or even larger customers, you need to have the right commercial model, right? Because mid-market customers might just offer you 100 seats, 200 seats, or 200 users, right? So how do you offer, how do you customize your offering to such an environment, right? So what's your take on how have the commercial models evolved in MDR, and where do you think they will head from here?
Right. Yeah, I think interesting question on the different commercial model that we see when it comes to MXTR services. So now, I think predominantly there are three different models that we see in the market deals, right? Per asset, per endpoint. So historically, if you ask me back in 2021, 2022, right, we use MDR market used to define endpoint as the desktop, laptop, right, server. But now, if you ask me, the definition has evolved itself, right? So the pricing metric is uh, per asset in most of the deals what we are seeing, right? And the asset definition largely encompasses multiple type of workload. It could be your server, it could be network devices, desktop, cloud workloads, identity workloads, and all, right? And then per user, we have also seen in some of the scenarios, but again, I think this is proposed by a very few specialized vendors, and this is often a very simplified pricing mechanism of the within the MXTR services. And the third model, which is predominantly what we have seen when it comes to the GSIs, right, global system integrators, which are already into the managed security services space, providing SOC as a service, we are seeing their, they do customize the scope, and typically we see either it's a hybrid type of model or it's a fixed fee kind of model. So uh, to summarize, when it comes to specialized security vendors, they do have a set pricing metric like per asset, per endpoint. But when it comes to the GSIs, right? So they do uh, customize the fees as per the requirement, because again, they're already into the environment, right? So they need to just pick up those scope which is not there, integrate with the other scope, and propose the MXDR service. So these are the different models that we see as of now. And again, I think interesting thing is what could be the next generation future models, right? For example, within MXTR space. And I think I'm sure many of the vendors and many of the service providers, they are evaluating, right, how we can evolve the different pricing model. So I think these are three different models that we believe that could potentially evolve, right? The first is your workflow or execution based pricing, right? Given agentic AI work on a particular task, right, on the workflow, so the pricing metric could get evolved basis the, the number of tasks, right? For example, number of alerts which are processed in a particular month, right, or a particular workflow to remediate a ticket. So the pricing model could evolve in that direction. And then again, I think outcome driven pricing, which has been into the discussion for variety of the reasons, right? And it's an interesting model. So, and again, the MXTR core objective is to to mitigate the threat and vulnerability. So possibly one of the other model could be how many vulnerabilities have been mitigated or how many threats have been contained, right? So this could be other possible model in the next 2 years or 3 years, right? And third model is the risk-based pricing. Again, I think given the risk profile varies depending on multiple factors, right? For example, it could be your domain. So a BFSI client or enterprise will be more risk, vulnerable to compared to the client or enterprise in the retail sector, right? So this model will be based on the risk profile of the customer, depending on the complexity, domain, and the other historical factor taken into consideration, the vulnerabilities or threat which happened for the particular customer profile. And we also believe this model would be dynamic model because your risk profile automatically, every 6 months, every 4 months, every quarter, we need to reassess the risk profile of the customer and see how we can, adjust the price. So I think these are the different models that we do anticipate that in MXTR these models could become the next generation models. So
It's
Kumar, what is your take? Like, what do you think? What are the other models that can shape up, right, the future
Sure.
in the MDR market?
Sure. I think when you spoke about how, this outcome-driven pricing is what we see. I think similarly, if you see one of the, key levers of outcome-driven pricing is that how do you bundle it all together and bring it as a service. So MDR as a service is what we're seeing more traction from an overall construct within cybersecurity, where, mature enterprises are contracting for end-to-end outcomes. They are sort of, looking for, only managing, not managing the tool, technology, and services, but leading into a service provider or a services organization to offer them that end-to-end services opportunity out there. So I think that is something which we sort of found interesting in our recent work or recent research we've done. And for this particular piece, I think from a pricing standpoint, this definitely allows the providers to command a premium pricing as compared to others. At the same time, I think if I think about from a bundling perspective, if you bolt on add-on offerings, or and we are seeing a few of them, like for digital forensics, attack surface management, or exposure management being added to the MDR bundle just to help uplift the TCV as well, or enterprises are demanding this as part of core capability. So I think we saw that a lot in our recent research which we took to market, definitely seeing price uptick as well.
So if I have to paraphrase, I think it is almost like a bouquet of offerings where buyers can choose based on their appetite in terms of do they want like a very basic service, or do they want some of these more gold-plated white glove services, including digital forensics and some of these services?
Yeah, I think Ricky, obviously, digital forensic was a bit more niche and boutique, but now is getting bundled as part of the MDR stack, with more and more enterprises demanding them as part of default services as well. So, not seeing it to be more white gloved anymore out there, but happy to take Arjun. What do you think? How do you think this is slightly differentiated out there in the market?
Before we get there, I think there's one question also around, and it probably do SMBs and large enterprises need different commercial models? Are you seeing a difference in market needs?
Yeah, I think yeah. Yeah, I think Ricky, partly we talked about the SMB market, right, in this conversation, and I think everyone will agree that when it comes to SMB market, they typically either the specialized vendors or the local vendors have more play into the system, right? And typically SMB space, we don't see a lot of complex environment compared to the large enterprises, right? So SMBs, what we understand, typically your specialized vendors, local vendors, they do have a bundled offering, they have a tiered offering depending on what type of service they need and depending on what environment volumetrics are there, right? So they do have those set pricing mechanism in place. But having said that, I think if you ask me, the large enterprises, right, which often involve multiple vendors, and already there will be some GSIs or some other companies which is into the MSS space, right? Typically, we have seen The if GSIs is already into the MSS space, they do customize the SOC offering to make it MXTR or to convert it to MXTR services. In that scenarios, we see a customized pricing approach, proposed by these vendors. But SMBs, I think what we understand, it's quite set. But again, I think depending on the customization and the scope, it could also vary, right? So in few of the scenarios, we have also seen it to be the fixed fee pricing, but predominantly it is the per asset per endpoint type of pricing being proposed for the SMB market compared to the large enterprises where we see more of an hybrid approach and the customized pricing.
I think this conversation on commercial narrative, sorry, and it sets up us very nicely in terms of a question that we've been getting very often of late, right? In this context where clients are asking for outcomes and they're pushing for more outcomes rather than sort of standard commercial models, are some of our the standard SLAs that used to be around, right? Things around mean time to respond, mean time to acknowledge, are those still relevant, or have you seen an evolution of these SLAs as well? I think Arjun, you are best placed to answer this, given
Yeah.
the work that you've been doing on this one.
Yep. Thank you so much for that question, Ricky. So as I was telling the audience also earlier that we published this MDR services peak metrics assessment for 2025 very recently. And what you just asked was one of the key themes that we tried dissecting after the assessment was published. And just like how pricing is evolving on MDR that Vinamra just covered, talking about risk-based pricing, outcome-based pricing, and execution-based pricing is possible future pricing models for MDR. Similarly, there's a lot that is happening on SLAs, but a lot of it is actually going unnoticed by organizations because the change of pace is very slow right now. But there is certainly a shift that we are observing in how providers and consumers look at SLAs for MDR services. And in all likelihood, the pace will accelerate in coming quarters as AI infusion becomes more popularized. And what you see on the slide, Milan, can if you can bring that up real quick because it's a slightly complex thing and it's easier explained using this slide. So yeah, so what you see on the slide is we have categorized SLAs into three buckets. The three buckets being established, evolving, and white space. So established category covers all major SLAs that have been part of MDR offering for quite some time now. Evolving category covers all the major SLAs that are beginning to come up in the market in past 1-2 years. And the last category is what we call the white space category, which covers some of the futuristic SLAs, given there's a lot of change happening in how MDR services are delivered. To clients with so much AI infusion in SOCs alone, which is just one small part of the entire MDR and service offering. Now, allow me to quickly cover these three categories just to give our audience a slightly more deeper view into what exactly I am talking about here. So I'll pick the first bucket here, which is the established benchmarks. Think of them like the traditional SLA anchors, and they cover the basic SLAs for any organization. Right? I'm talking about mean time to detect, mean time to respond, severity-based response windows ranging from P1 to P4, and so on and so forth. These everyone in from the provider side kind of provides these today. Almost all the buyers expect them by default. But here's the catch, right? These metrics are no longer differentiators if you're either buying MDR services or providing MDR services. So think of them as table stakes. In fact, almost all the traditional SLAs are more speed focused SLAs. So if you look at them, right, mean time to detect, mean time to respond, they're more speed focused. And they don't really translate into true business outcomes for clients. So for example, a fast detection doesn't really help if the false positives are too high in a SOC or if the threat containment lags behind, right? So these are more speed-based SLAs that we have traditionally followed, but that is all now changing. And that brings me to the second category, which comes into play, which we call as evolving standards. Right. So providers are starting to expand SLAs beyond speed into areas that are part of this category. Some of them are root cause analysis, closure timelines, false positive rate ratios, policy violation handling windows. Right. So these are some of the examples of the evolving standards as we observe them. The shift reflects a new reality based on how we see it, right? So enterprises don't just want fast detection, but they also want reliable, more accurate, and more accountable service from the providers. Also, these evolving standards signal that MDR is no longer just about alert handling as we've traditionally seen it. It's also about risk aligned accountability. So metrics like false positive ratio directly tie into cost savings and analyst productivity, which the CISOs can then take to the board or the senior leadership within the organization. And I think this point specifically dovetails very well into the point that Vinamra made earlier on having some risk-based pricing model or outcome-based pricing model. The third category that you see on the screen is the white space differentiators. Now, where is all this headed, right? This is that exact bucket. So this is where the next wave of MDR differentiation will happen based on our analysis and our understanding and our read of the market. Some of the key SLAs that can be very relevant in the future are log source onboarding or ingestion times. So how quickly a provider can make new environments visible, right? How fast can you shorten the time to realize or time to market for mid-market or large customers. The second SLA could be playbook or use case activation SLA, speed of turning detection logic into active business defense for organizations. Another example is time to enrich or qualify an alert. This becomes very important when you look at the SOCs from an AI angle, right? So critical for AI powered SOCs where context matters more than just speed. And providers that embrace these can actually signal AI readiness to their end customers, to their potential new customers, showing that MDR is not just a static but a continuously improving, enriched, and contextual offering. And from commercial angle, also maybe tying SLA outcomes or SLA performance in these newer or emerging areas to some sorts of penalties and incentives can make MDR not just a service but a strategic trust anchor that Vinamra has extensively covered on the slide I think that he was presenting. So that is where and how I see the SLAs evolving a point in time, Ricky.
Sachin, I think that's very helpful. Also, I think if I have to sort of summarize in my mind, I think the basics are still important. So we're not saying some of the standard, the basic SLAs that used to be around there, they need to be done. They still are important, but they need to be augmented with some additional metrics which make more sense in today's times. Okay. This is helpful. And sorry if you hear some background noise. My 6-month-old daughter is very excited and about this topic. She seems to be wanting to participate and ask questions. So if you hear some background noise, please ignore it. All right. We have a question from the audience as well, which we can take, which is really around, do you see MDR vendors differentiate based on industry, or do they have an industry focus, or is this largely an industry agnostic solution?
So I
I
think
think Kumar, Arjun, you guys are.
I think I can get started first. I think what we're seeing, from a supply side perspective is that there are these specific playbooks which helps vendors to differentiate, and they are custom and curated for specific industries. We've so the verticalization or industry specificity, specifically for a manufacturing client versus a BFSI client. I think those are a few things where there are, specific playbooks or proof point which vendors have developed, which they sort of showcase as differentiators, and it definitely helps them because it brings the right context, it brings the right industry flavor and so forth. So do see that on specific industries out there from a differentiation standpoint out there. But I think let me just throw it back from a pricing standpoint, Ricky, Vinamra, do you see any differentiation when it comes to specific industries?
At least
I
I have
think
not seen sort of an industry specific MDR solution and a pricing specifically tailored to industry. But I think we have some perspective, and Vinamra can talk more about it. I think we do have some perspective on. We've seen that certain industries are generally have higher propensity to pay versus some other industries who are a bit more prudent when it comes to negotiations or discounting their expectations in terms of MDR price. I think Vinamra, you're more closer to it if you want to talk a bit
yeah,
about it.
correct. Yeah, I think if you look at the regulated industries like healthcare or banking financial services, right, typically we see they command premium compared to the non-regulated sectors such as your retail, right, manufacturing. But again, I think there is a caveat here is that in the manufacturing sector, you see the OT devices into the play, right, which is again adding to the overall complexity when it comes to MXDR services. In fact, I think recently we have seen vendors augmenting their offering with the OT, IoT modules, right? So that also adds on. So I think multiple factors impacting the price, but in general, if you ask me, regulated industries, because of meeting the compliance, right? So typically they have commanded some premium, and I think Kumari also talked about the playbooks, right? So you need very curated, specific playbooks for those industries, right? So that could also entail audit and more scrutiny or maybe complexity involved, right, when it comes to these regulated industries compared to the non-regulated industries. Uh, but from the overall, if you ask me, on an average, these factors are important, but not that important, right? Of course, the factor around regulatory requirements and compliance will impact, but we don't see a lot of difference in the pricing when it comes to the industries. So there could be a pricing impact difference of plus minus 8 to 15%, between the non-regulated and the regulated industries.
Yeah, I think I can quickly add on to
Sure.
what Kumar and Vinamra explains, right? So, industry specificity, in my opinion, certainly is real when it comes to the MDR market. I have seen GSIs building industry-specific MDR offerings. Telcos again are targeting. Telcos are now, by the way, into the MDR market, and they are targeting more network-heavy industries, which is their sweet spot. Thirdly, I think there is a category which we call specialist MDR providers. They perhaps bring the best amongst these three categories, the kind of capabilities that they bring to the table. And to Vinamra's point, I think industries where we see this being more prevalent or being more pronounced are the regulated ones, of course. So BFS. We also see industry specific MDR offerings for HLS industry. Public sector is another big one that has come up in past couple of years. And last but not the least is the energy and utilities vertical, right? Because of so much happening across the globe in terms of nation state sponsored attacks and everything. Energy and utilities as an industry has also come up as in terms of industry specific MDR offerings from these providers. So these are the two, three, or maybe four big industries that I see having industry focused MDR offerings for themselves.
So I think before we wrap up for today, I think one thing that is probably top of mind for a lot of our audience and a lot of the industry in general is how will AI and MDR form a two-way conversation with AI powering MDR, but MDR also safeguarding AI? Because till now we've spoken about how AI is enhancing, accelerating the efficiency and effectiveness of MDR. Have you seen the other way around where MDR is also helping you safeguard your AI workloads? Uh,
I can maybe take a first shot at it
Sure.
and maybe feel free to add. It's a yeah, right, Ricky. It's a two-way street. So and there are two ways to look at it, right? So first one is AI powering MDR. So AI certainly accelerate detection, triaging, response by automating everything. Gen AI specifically, the Gen AI co-pilots, as we are observing them in the market being embedded in MDR services, they're shortening investigation timelines. They are democratizing threat hunting capabilities. So they are no longer, it's no longer just the top tier GSI's game now. So it's democratizing a lot of it, even for the non-expert teams, right? AI, in fact, allows MDR to scale linearly with threats, not just the headcount. So that kind of breaks the historic dependency on the human analyst, and and this ties back to the original point that we made at the start of this conversation on talent shortage. So that is how we are seeing AI powering MDR. Now the other piece of MDR safeguarding AI, again, it's an emerging theme. There are not a lot of concrete case studies or enterprise stories that have come up, but this is certainly a thing that we're seeing happening in the market already, but again at a very nascent stage. So with that said, I think as enterprises adopt more of these AI and ML models, attackers can also start targeting, or rather lead with some of these targeted attacks such as data poisoning, prompt injections, and model thefts. So that is where I think MDR will certainly come in handy in protecting a lot of that AI AI posture of these enterprises and organizations.
Yeah, right. I think just to add there, I think Arjun, as you and Ricky, as you talk about, I think as the industry evolves and adopts these more AI agents, definitely they have a role to play in enterprise ecosystems around their security operation. But at the same time, they too need to be thought from a cybersecurity perspective. So definitely, traditional controls of running them in a safe runtime environment, also having the right authentication authorization is important. But at the same time, monitoring the agent, obviously conversation on governance, continuous compliance and monitoring, bring in explainability of action. I think that's where we would see the role of cyber and to an extent, providers on the MDR side take a leap. I think how do you build that monitoring governance big together, explainability and auditability into your offering, embedding KPIs like bias detection, regulatory alignment, etc. Those would be important here from a future standpoint in the MDR space.
I think maybe one final question before we sort of wrap up, and then probably this goes to you, Kumar. How are some complementary offerings like continuous threat exposure management and attack surface management? How are they redefining MDR per se? I think you touched upon some of this earlier, but I don't know if you have a different perspective to specifically talking about CTEM or attack surface management, and how are they redefining MDR?
I think for most RFP conversations, attack surface management as a component is reflecting, taking more proactive measures to their existing threat landscape. I think we do see that across the IT, OT, cloud, and identity environments. Again, as CTEM is more around, stimulating attack paths and prioritizing exposures, so which allows MDR to shift from reactive to proactive. I think we seeing at least this time of when we sort of spoke to enterprises, these are a few things which they highlighted, and they wanted this to be part of standard construct as part of a renewal, etc., etc. So definitely, and as compared to last time, when these are more add-on services, not sort of consumed, demanded holistically by enterprises, but pushed by vendors, we see this to be more in demand right now. I think from a market perspective.
Thanks, Kumar. I think the market is at a very interesting juncture, and I've also seen the market evolve from where it was to now where it is. But I'm personally very excited about where this market is headed as we sort of scale adoption and we see more customers really joining the bandwagon. And we'll keep an eye out, and we continue to publish some very interesting research on this market. That's about it for today. If there are any further questions, please put in the chat, in the LinkedIn chat, and we're happy to take those up and either respond offline or in the chat itself. But thank you so much for being a very interactive and a participative audience, and thank you for listening in and joining us for today. Yeah, have a good rest of the day, please.
Thank you, Ricky. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.